I remember the cold of the floor against my cheek. It was a strange kind of cold, the kind that seeps right into your bones and doesn't let go. I remember the silence, too. The deep, heavy quiet that came right after my last scream faded into nothing. That day, the man I had promised my life to, he took it. He stood over me, and the last thing I saw was the blank look in his eyes. Just emptiness. But what he didn't know, what no one could have known, is that my death wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of my real life. Before all that, before the cold floor and the silence, I was just normal. I had a job I liked, working as a graphic designer from my little apartment with the big window that looked out over the city. I paid my bills, I met my friends for brunch on Sundays, and I dreamed of a life that looked like the ones I saw in the movies. Simple, right? I thought I was happy. Or at least, I was good at pretending I was. He was my Prince Charming, or so I told everyone. The kind of guy you bring home to meet your parents and they just melt. He was handsome, successful, and he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I remember our first apartment together, the smell of fresh paint and the sound of his laughter echoing in the empty rooms. I gave him everything. I folded my dreams into his, my personality into his. I became the person I thought he wanted. And for a while, I almost convinced myself it was enough. But there was this emptiness, a quiet little hum in the back of my mind, even on the best days. I'd be laughing at a party, his arm wrapped tight around my waist, and a cold wave would just wash over me. Who was I? I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger wearing my clothes. No one else saw it, of course. To the outside world, we were perfect. The golden couple. That was my secret. The smile I wore was the heaviest thing I owned. Then, the little things started. It wasn't a sudden storm. It was more like the tide slowly coming in, so you don't realize you're drowning until the water is at your neck. He'd suggest what I should wear. He'd worry when I went out with my friends, so I just stopped going out. Love songs on the radio started to sound like warnings. His compliments always had a little sting at the end, like, "You look beautiful tonight. It's a shame you don't make that effort more often." His eyes, the same ones that used to look at me with so much love, would sometimes go flat, empty, like a doll's eyes. I became an expert at managing his moods. It was like a full-time job on top of my real one. I learned to read the set of his jaw, the tone of his voice when he walked in the door. My world shrunk until it was just the four walls of our home, and my only goal was to keep the peace. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that all couples go through this. I was a frog in a pot of water, and I didn't even notice it was boiling. But what happened next? That's when the water started to burn. The first time the water truly burned was on my birthday. He threw me this huge surprise party. Or at least, that's what he called it. All his work colleagues were there, his gym buddies, people I'd never even met. I remember standing in the middle of my own living room, holding a plastic cup, and feeling completely invisible. My friends hadn't been invited. He said he forgot. Later that night, when I tried to tell him how I felt, he just sighed. That long-suffering sound he made. He looked at me, his eyes tired, and said, "Can't you just be grateful for once?" I felt so small. I just nodded and apologized. I apologized on my own birthday. But the real turning point, the one I kept secret from everyone, was what he did with my best friend, Sarah. He'd accidentally seen a text from her on my phone. She was just checking in, asking if I was okay because I'd been so distant. He didn't confront me. He didn't yell. He just took my phone, and with me standing right there, he blocked her number. Then he deleted her from all my social media. He looked up, his expression perfectly calm, and said, "She's negative energy. We don't need that in our lives." And what did I do? I did nothing. I stood there and watched him erase the most important person in my life with a few taps of his thumb. I never told Sarah the truth. I just let her think I abandoned her. Then there was the money. I'd always kept a separate savings account. It was my little secret, my just-in-case fund. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One afternoon, I logged in to check the balance, and my stomach just dropped to the floor. It was empty. Zero. When I asked him, he didn't even flinch. He'd transferred it all to his account for a big investment opportunity. He smiled, patted my hand, and told me not to worry my pretty little head about it, that he was building our future. I knew in that moment he wasn't building anything. He was tearing down my only escape route, brick by brick. How do you leave someone when you don't even have enough money for a bus ticket? A week before the end, I had a dream. It was so vivid. I dreamt I was in our apartment, but it was filled with water, up to my chest. I wasn't scared, just cold. And he was there, on the other side of the room, smiling at me. But his teeth were sharp, like a shark's. I woke up gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break right out of my chest. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a stupid nightmare from eating pizza too late. But a part of me knew. It was a warning. My own mind was screaming at me to run, and I just kept telling it to be quiet. But what happened next was even worse. It was the night before everything changed. He came home angry about something at work. I was trying to stay out of his way, just making dinner quietly. I dropped a plate. It shattered on the kitchen tile, and the sound was like a gunshot in the silence. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to leave a bruise, but with a strength that was terrifying, and he led me to the broken pieces. He knelt down, his eyes locked on mine, and whispered, "Pick them up." My hands were shaking so hard I cut my fingers on the shards. I remember seeing my own blood mix with the spaghetti sauce on the floor. He just watched me, his face a complete blank. That night, I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep, every muscle in my body screaming. I finally understood. The water wasn't just boiling anymore. I was being cooked alive. I thought I had seen the worst of him, that I had survived his darkest mood. I was a fool. That wasn't his darkness. That was just the shadow it cast before it finally came out into the light. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Subscribe and hit the bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you about the final day, and the moment I realized my life was truly over. The next day was quiet, too quiet. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like a blanket of snow that muffles the whole world. He was sweet that morning. He made me coffee, kissed my forehead, and told me he was sorry about the night before. He said work was just stressful. I nodded and smiled, my hand instinctively hiding the small cuts on my fingers. I spent the day trying to believe him, trying to convince myself that the monster from the night before was gone, that my Prince Charming was back. It was a lie, and a part of me knew it, but it was the only thing keeping me upright. The end didn't come with a roar. It came with a phone call. It was my boss, just a quick check-in about a project deadline. I kept my voice low, professional, trying to end the call as fast as possible, but he heard. He was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but I could feel his eyes on me. When I hung up, he didn't move. He just looked at me, and that blankness was back, that doll-eyed stare. "Who was that?" he asked, his voice perfectly level. I told him it was my boss. He just nodded slowly. "You know I don't like you taking work calls after 6. I tried to explain that it was important, that it was my job, but the words felt like sand in my mouth. It wasn't about the call. It was never about the call. It was about the one tiny part of my life that he didn't own yet. He stood up, slowly, deliberately, like an actor hitting his mark on a stage. He walked towards me, and with every step he took, the room got smaller, the air got thinner. He backed me into the hallway, his body blocking the light from the living room. I remember the pattern on the wallpaper behind my head, little yellow flowers. I focused on them, trying to pretend I was somewhere else. He put his hands on the wall on either side of my head, trapping me. He leaned in close, so close I could smell the coffee he'd made me that morning. "I give you everything," he whispered, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. "This beautiful home, this life, and you disrespect me. In my own house." I started to shake my head, to say no, that wasn't it at all. But the words wouldn't come out. My throat had closed up. I saw the switch flip. The last light of the person I thought I knew went out, and what was left was pure, cold darkness. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was a stranger. And then he pushed me. It wasn't a violent shove, not at first. It was just a firm, deliberate push backward. My heel caught on the edge of the rug. I remember the feeling of falling, that split second where you're weightless and time slows down. My head hit the corner of the little wooden table we kept by the door. The sound was dull, a sick thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. I remember a flash of white-hot pain, and then nothing. I was on the floor, looking up at the ceiling. The pain was fading, replaced by a strange, disconnected warmth spreading through my body. My last thoughts weren't profound. I didn't see my life flash before my eyes. I just thought of Sarah, and how I never got to tell her why I disappeared. I thought of my secret savings account, now empty, and the bus ticket I never bought. And my very last thought, as the edges of my vision started to go dark, was of those little yellow flowers on the wallpaper. How I'd always hated them. He stood over me, his face a blur. I tried to speak, to scream, to do anything, but all that came out was a soft little sigh. And then, the cold of the floor seeped into my cheek, and the world just stopped. But he didn't know. He couldn't have known. As the last bit of warmth left my body, I felt a pull. Not a violent pull, but a gentle lift, like a feather caught on an updraft. I was rising. I looked down and saw it all. I saw my body, lying still on the floor. I saw him, just standing there watching. And I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, just a quiet, overwhelming peace. My life on that floor was over. But my story, it was just getting started. Do you think a person can truly change after facing death? Or are we always who we were? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe and hit that bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you what I saw on the other side, and the choice I was given that changed everything. It wasn't like floating in water. It was more like the world had just let go of me. The crushing weight of gravity, the ache in my bones, the sting of the cuts on my fingers, it was all gone. For a moment, I was just awareness, a point of view with no body attached. The blackness behind my eyes dissolved, and I could see the room again, but it was different, muted, like I was watching an old movie through a thick pane of glass. And then I saw her, my body, crumpled on the floor by that little wooden table. The yellow flowers on the wallpaper seemed to mock the stillness of the scene. And I saw him. He just stood there, looking down at what he'd done. He wasn't panicked. He didn't rush to the phone or try to help. He just watched. His face was a mask of calm indifference, the same look he'd have when deciding what to order for dinner. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. The man I had loved was a void, and I had fallen right into it. The edges of the room began to dissolve, like a photograph dipped in water. The sound of his breathing, the faint hum of the refrigerator, it all faded into a deep, profound silence. The only thing that felt real was this pull, a gentle tug on my very soul, away from the scene, away from the life I had just lost. And in the distance, a light began to grow. It wasn't a blinding light, not like a headlight in the dark. It was a warm, golden glow, like the first rays of sunrise on a perfect morning. It didn't hurt to look at. It felt like an invitation. As I moved toward it, or as it moved toward me, I'm still not sure which, a feeling washed over me that I don't have words for. It was peace, but it was more than that. It was the feeling of a fever finally breaking, of a heavy weight being lifted from your chest after years of carrying it. Every hurt, every betrayal, every single moment I had felt small or scared, it all just melted away into this incredible warmth. It wasn't a light you see with your eyes. It was a light you feel with your entire being. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't dead. I was just free. And in that warmth I felt something. Or someone. It wasn't a person, not with a face or a body. It was a presence. A vast, unconditional love that wrapped around me like the softest blanket. There were no words, but I understood a message, clear as day, deep in my soul. You are safe. You are loved. Your suffering is over. It was a love so pure, so powerful. It made every love I'd ever known on earth feel like a pale shadow. I finally understood that I had never, ever been alone, not even in my darkest moments. Have you ever had a moment where you felt a sense of peace that you just couldn't explain? Let me know your story in the comments. Subscribe and hit that bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you about the voice I heard in that light and the impossible choice I was given that changed everything. In that golden warmth, I wasn't just me anymore. I was bigger. The little box I'd lived in my whole life, the one made of my name, my job, my fears, it just fell away. I didn't have eyes, but I could see in every direction. I didn't have ears, but I could hear a kind of music, a celestial hum that was the sound of pure love. The light wasn't just yellow or gold, it was every color I'd ever seen, and a million more I had no names for, and each color was a feeling. Blue was peace, a soft pink was tenderness, a deep shimmering violet was a wisdom so profound it felt ancient. The presence was there with me. It wasn't a man with a beard on a throne. It was everything. It was the light, the music, the love. It was a consciousness so vast it held every star and every grain of sand. And yet it was focused entirely on me. It knew me. Not just the things I'd done, but the deepest truths of my heart. The thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. The dreams I had buried so deep I'd forgotten they were there. And in that total knowing, there was no judgment. Not a single ounce. There was only a love that said, "Welcome home. We've missed you." Then, my life began to unfold around me. It wasn't like watching a movie on a screen. I was in it. But this time, I wasn't just seeing it from my own point of view. I saw it from every angle. I felt the pain I had caused others with a careless word. I felt the joy I had given my friend Sarah with a simple, silly gift. And when I saw the moments with him, the dark ones, I didn't just feel my fear. I felt his. I saw the scared little boy inside the monster, a soul so twisted by its own pain that the only way it knew how to exist was to cause more. For the first time, I didn't see an enemy. I just saw a tragedy. And then the first great revelation washed over me. The presence communicated it not with words, but with a pure, undeniable understanding that settled into my soul. My suffering had never been a punishment. It was a classroom. Every tear I cried had been washing away a layer of who I thought I was, to reveal who I was truly meant to be. The pain wasn't the point of the story. It was just the pressure needed to turn coal into a diamond. It wasn't my destiny to be a victim. It was my training to become a warrior. I was shown a boundary then. It wasn't a gate or a river. It was a shimmering curtain of light, more brilliant than anything I had yet seen. I understood that if I passed through it, I would completely merge with that incredible love. There would be no more me, no more pain, just eternal peace. And oh, how I wanted to. I wanted to let go and just dissolve into that light forever. But as I moved toward it, a second understanding, a choice was presented to me. You can stay, the presence seemed to say, or you can go back. Your work is not done. A vision appeared. It wasn't of my old life. It was a vision of other women, their faces shadowed, their eyes filled with the same fear I had known. And I saw myself, standing in the light, speaking to them. I saw my story, my pain, becoming a key that could unlock their cages. The message was crystal clear. The pain you endured was not just for you. It was a fire you walked through so you could lead others out of the flames. I finally understood. He hadn't just taken my life. He had given me my purpose. Have you ever felt like your greatest pain might actually be your greatest strength in disguise? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe and hit that bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you about the moment I chose to return, the gut-wrenching pain of coming back to my broken body, and what the police found when they finally broke down the door. I stood there, on the edge of eternity, looking at that shimmering curtain of light. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It promised an end to everything I had ever suffered. No more fear, no more pain. Just home. A final, peaceful home. I wanted to step through more than I had ever wanted anything in my life. Just one more step, and I would be free forever. I started to move, to let go, to surrender to that perfect peace. But then, the vision came. The faces of women I had never met. I saw a young woman in a college dorm, her boyfriend's angry texts lighting up her phone. I saw a mother in a beautiful suburban house, hiding a bruise on her arm from her children. I saw an older woman, financially trapped, looking out her window with dead eyes. I saw hundreds, thousands of them, all trapped in the same invisible prison I had just escaped. They were all me, and I was all of them. And then the presence gave me the final, most important piece of the puzzle. It wasn't a voice I heard with ears, but a truth that bloomed in the center of my soul, a thought that was more real than any I had ever had on my own. It said, "This is not where your story ends. The pain you endured was not your destiny. It was your preparation. Go back. Your voice will heal others." In that instant, I understood. My life hadn't been a tragedy. It had been a training ground. He thought he was destroying me, but he was forging me into a weapon. Not a weapon of anger, but a weapon of hope. I looked at the shimmering curtain of peace one last time, and I turned away. I chose them. I chose the pain, the struggle, the cold, hard world. I chose to go back. I sent a single thought back to that loving presence. I'm ready. The return wasn't gentle. It was like being thrown off a cliff. One moment I was weightless love. The next I was slammed back into 5 senses, all screaming at once. The first thing that hit me was the cold. That awful, deep cold of the floor, but 1,000 times worse. Then the pain exploded behind my eyes. A white-hot agony that ripped through my entire skull. I could feel the weight of my own limbs, the sticky dampness of my own blood matting my hair. The beautiful celestial music was gone, replaced by the frantic, thumping beat of my own heart, struggling to work again. I took a breath, or I tried to. It was a ragged, wet gasp that burned in my lungs. My eyes fluttered open. The world was a blurry mess of ceiling plaster and the faint light from the living room. I was back. I was in the broken body he had left on the floor. The piece was gone, but in its place was something new. A tiny, flickering ember of purpose, deep in my chest. I was alive, and for the first time, I knew why. Have you ever had to make a choice so hard it felt like it would break you in two? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe and hit that bell, because in the next video, I'll tell you about the sounds I heard from outside the apartment and what the police found when they finally broke down that door. The first thing I remember is the smell. Antiseptic and bleach. So sharp it felt like it was cleaning out my memories. Then came the sound, a low, steady beep that seemed to be counting the seconds of my new life. My eyelids felt like they were glued shut, but I forced them open. The ceiling was white. Not the familiar cracked plaster of my apartment, but a perfect, sterile, soulless white. I was in a hospital. The pain was a dull, heavy blanket covering my entire body, but underneath it, I felt that tiny ember of purpose, still glowing. A woman in a white coat came into focus. A doctor. She had kind eyes, but her expression was one of complete disbelief. She told me my name. She told me I had a severe traumatic brain injury. She used a lot of medical words I didn't understand, but the one I'll never forget was miracle. She said, "Frankly, you shouldn't be awake. You shouldn't be alive. The paramedics said you had no pulse when they found you." She looked at my chart, then back at me, as if I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. I knew why. They were looking at medical science, but I had touched the divine. How could I ever explain that to her? But what happened next was even harder. My parents walked in. My mom let out a sound, a choked sob that was half relief and half pure agony. She rushed to my bedside, her hand trembling as she touched my arm, scared she might break me. My dad stood by the door, trying to be strong, but I could see the cracks in his tough guy face. His eyes were red and glassy. They saw their broken daughter. They saw a victim. They had no idea they were looking at a warrior who had just come back from the other side of the universe, armed with a new mission. And then I saw her standing behind them. Sarah. My Sarah. The friend I had let him erase from my life. Her face was a storm of emotions. Relief, anger, heartbreak. Our eyes met, and the first real tears of my new life streamed down my face. I couldn't speak past the tube in my throat, but I didn't need to. In that one look, I tried to say everything. "I'm sorry. I missed you. It wasn't my fault." She just nodded, tears flowing freely down her own cheeks, and whispered, "I know. I always knew." That was the moment a little piece of my old life clicked back into place. But it felt different. It was a foundation, not a cage. The days that followed were a blur of pain and physical therapy. Learning to walk again at 32 is a humbling experience. Every step was a battle. My body was a stranger to me, a broken vessel I was forced to pilot. Some nights I'd wake up from nightmares, my heart pounding, the cold of the floor on my cheek. The fear was still there, a ghost in the machine. But the first true sign that I was different happened a week later. A male orderly came in without knocking, his voice a little too loud. The old me would have shrunk, made myself smaller, apologized for just existing. But this time, I looked him right in the eye, my voice weak but steady, and said, "Please knock next time." He was so startled, he just mumbled an apology and backed out of the room. In the silence that followed, I felt it. The ember wasn't just glowing anymore. It was becoming a flame. How do you begin to heal when the world only sees your scars, but not the strength that came with them? Let me know what you think in the comments. Subscribe and hit that bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you what the police told me about the man who did this to me, and the shocking discovery they made in our apartment that he never wanted anyone to see. The police came 2 days later. A detective, a man with tired eyes and a gentle voice named Miller, sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair by my hospital bed. My parents had left to get coffee, and Sarah sat in the corner, a silent, protective presence. Miller didn't ask me what happened. He already knew. He was there to tell me what they found. He told me that after the paramedics took me away, they sealed the apartment. When they searched it, they found things that didn't make sense. In the back of his closet, behind a false panel, they found a locked metal box. Inside that box wasn't money. It was a collection. A lock of blonde hair tied with a blue ribbon, a single silver earring, a driver's license for a woman who had been reported missing 2 years ago from a town 3 states away. There were 4 other licenses, 4 other women, all with their pictures smiling up from the plastic, all of them listed as missing persons. My blood ran cold, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a sudden, horrifying clarity. The blankness in his eyes, it wasn't because he was angry at me. It was because I was just another object to him, another trophy for his collection. He wasn't my Prince Charming who had turned into a monster. He had always been the monster. I was just the first one who got away. The old me would have shattered into a million pieces right there. But as Detective Miller spoke, something strange was happening inside me. The presence I felt in the light, that feeling of unconditional love, it echoed in my soul. I looked at the photos of those women, and I didn't feel hatred for him. I felt a profound, bottomless sorrow. Sorrow for him, for a soul so lost and broken that this was all it knew, and an immense burning love for them, for the lives they never got to finish. I knew in that moment, with a certainty that was as real as the hospital bed beneath me, what the voice meant. Your voice will heal others. It wasn't just for women in bad relationships. It was for them. For the ones who didn't get to come back. I had to speak for them. My relationships changed overnight. My parents wanted me to be angry, to scream and cry and rage. They saw a victim who needed to be coddled. But when they looked at me, they saw a strange calmness they couldn't understand. I wasn't their broken little girl anymore. I tried to explain, but how do you tell your parents you had to die to find yourself? Sarah was different. She didn't need an explanation. She saw the change in my eyes. She just sat with me, held my hand while I did my physical therapy, and when I finally told her everything about the light, the presence, the choice, she just nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "So what's the plan?" She was my bridge back to this world, the first soldier in my new army. My mission started right there, from that hospital bed. With Sarah's help, I created an anonymous blog. I didn't use my name. I just called myself The Woman Who Came Back. My first post was short. I just wrote, "He thought he was burying me, but he didn't know I was a seed." And then I told a small part of my story. Not the violence, not yet. I wrote about the feeling of being invisible, of walking on eggshells, of losing yourself one tiny piece at a time. I posted it and went to sleep expecting nothing. When I woke up, there were over 1,000 comments. Women from all over the world sharing their own stories, their own prisons. Me too, they wrote. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for seeing me. I cried reading them, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition. The vision was real. I had found my people. The day I left the hospital, I stood in front of the mirror in my parents' guest room. The scar on my head was still angry and red, hidden beneath my hair. I was thinner, weaker, but my eyes were different. They weren't haunted anymore. They were clear. The emptiness that had lived in me for so long was gone, filled with that golden light I remembered. I wasn't just a graphic designer who had survived something terrible. I was a messenger. He had taken my old life, my old identity, my old dreams, and in their place, he had unknowingly given me my true purpose. He thought he was writing my ending, but he had just written the first sentence of my real story. Do you believe that our greatest pain can unlock our true purpose? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit that bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you about the trial, the moment I faced him in court for the first time, and the words I said that left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. It's strange. For so long, the memory that defined me was the cold of that floor, the silence. But that's not what I remember most anymore. When I close my eyes now, I feel the warmth of that golden light. I feel that unconditional love. The man who tried to end my story didn't realize he was just turning the page to the most important chapter. He took my life, yes, but in doing so, he accidentally gave me back my soul. The scars are still there. There's a faint white line hidden in my hair, a permanent map of where my old life ended. But it's not a mark of shame. It's proof. It's the X that marks the spot where a broken woman was buried, and a warrior began to grow. I learned that you don't just heal from your trauma. You learn to live with it, to grow around it, like a tree that becomes stronger in the places where it was broken. My pain didn't destroy me. It carved out a space inside me that I could finally fill with light. The most important thing I learned on the other side was that my pain wasn't a punishment. It was a classroom. And I've come to believe that this is true for everyone. We all face moments that feel like the end. The death of a dream, the loss of a relationship, the failure that brings you to your knees. It feels like you're being buried alive. But what if you're not being buried? What if you're being planted? What if all that darkness is just the soil you need to finally become the person you were always meant to be? He thought he was writing my final chapter, but he only wrote the introduction. The rest of this story, I'm writing it myself. Every single day. It's a story about turning pain into purpose and using your voice to light the way for others who are still lost in the dark. My story is just one. This community we're building here is a place for all the stories that prove our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths. So I have to ask you, what if the hardest thing you've ever gone through wasn't actually the end, but the beginning of your real story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If stories of survival and transformation matter to you, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell. Together, we can show the world that even after the darkest night, the sun will always rise again.